Ever feel like you're just drowning in data? You're not alone.
Yeah.
We're doing this deep dive on data-driven businesses because it seems like the reality is always so much messier than all the hype.
Right.
We've got excerpts from Ashish Pathak's Medium article, The Hard Thing About Data. It wiggles.
Yeah.
And he really gets to the heart of this whole struggle.
He does, yeah. We always hear about how data is this key to unlocking these incredible business insights, right? But Pathak points out this disconnect. Companies get so excited about the potential, and then they kind of hit a wall when the data doesn't magically tell them everything they need to know.
It's like someone handed you a treasure map, but it's more like a toddler's art project than a path to riches, you know?
Laugh slightly.
Pathak calls this the wiggling chart problem.
Yeah.
Have you run into that?
Oh, yeah.
Like you're looking for those clear trends in your data, but it's just bouncing all over the place.
Yeah, and that constant fluctuation, it's not just frustrating, but it can lead to some serious decision fatigue.
Oh, I bet.
Think about it. If you're freaking out about every little change in your sales figures, you're never going to make any real progress.
So how do we cut through all that noise? How do we figure out what we should actually pay attention to?
Well, that's where this idea of an XMR chart comes in.
Okay.
And before you think it's some crazy statistical tool that you need a PhD for, it's actually pretty simple.
Okay.
Think of it this way. You're trying to hear this faint radio signal, but there's all this static in the background, right?
Yeah.
An XMR chart is like a filter for that. It helps isolate the signal so you can actually hear what's being said. So it helps you tell the difference between, those random data blips and the meaningful changes that you need to pay attention to.
So instead of freaking out every time the numbers move, this chart basically says, hey, this is normal, or hold up, this is something you need to look into.
Exactly, yeah.
That sounds like it could be huge in actually using data to make decisions instead of just being overwhelmed by it.
Absolutely. And the best part is you don't have to be a statistician to use it. Pathak's point is that tools like this make data analysis something anyone can do, not just experts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
If everyone in the company can understand the data, imagine how much faster you could move, how much more you could get done.
Exactly.
But Pathak doesn't stop there, does he?
No, he doesn't.
He goes on to create this whole framework for how to build data-driven products. And I have to say, even for someone like me who's not, coding every day, it's really interesting.
I agree. And it's really cool how he takes what seems like this really complex thing and breaks it down into these really manageable steps.
Uh-huh.
He starts with this idea of a metric tree, which sounds kind of, I don't know, whimsical.
Yeah, a little bit.
But it's actually a powerful way to organize your data and make sure you're tracking the right things.
Okay, so I'm picturing this big oak tree with like sales figures and customer retention rates instead of leaves.
Laugh slightly.
What does a metric tree actually look like in the real world, like for a business?
So think of your company's main objective, like increasing revenue, for example. That's the trunk of the tree.
Okay.
And then each branch represents a key part of reaching that objective.
Okay.
So one branch might be getting more customers, and then another one might be getting people to spend more money when they buy something.
And then those branches, they split into smaller and smaller branches with even more specific things you're measuring, right?
That's it. It's like a roadmap showing how all the different parts of your business lead back to that one big goal.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually change those metrics,
Right.
It's like data analysis is kind of like being a detective, but you're trying to solve a crime that already happened.
Yeah.
How do you go from just understanding the past to actually changing the future?
Well, that's where control factors come in.
Okay.
These are the things you can actually control to make those metrics move the way you want. It's about looking at what you can change and then using data to see how those changes actually affect things.
Can you give me an example? I'm picturing a business owner standing in front of this big control panel with all these levers and dials.
Okay, sure. Let's say you run an online store that sells clothes. Your goal is to sell more clothes, obviously.
Right.
So some of your control factors might be how much you spend on advertising on social media.
Okay.
Or how your product pages are designed.
Uh-huh.
Or even how fast your website loads.
Oh, interesting. So it's not just about looking at sales numbers. It's about seeing how all these other things affect those sales numbers.
Exactly.
Almost like you're doing an experiment.
That's a great way to put it. Pathak's whole point is that using data the right way means running experiments, just like a scientist would.
I like that. So you're not just blindly following the data. You're testing things out and seeing what works.
Exactly. You make a guess, test it out, and then the data tells you if you were right or not.
That makes a lot more sense to me. So when we talk about these data-driven products, what does that even mean?
It means you're not just showing people raw data, you're actually giving them insights they can use. Okay,
Right.
like imagine a dashboard that doesn't just show you a bunch of wiggly lines, but it points out when something weird happens and then gives you ideas about why it might be happening based on your control factors.
That'd be amazing. It's like having your own personal data analyst built into the tools you use every day.
Right.
Are there any other examples of how you can build a product that actually tells people what to do instead of just throwing data at them?
Yeah, definitely. Think about A/B testing. What if you could easily try different versions of your website and see which one people like better without needing a developer to set it all up for you?
Yeah.
Or what if your marketing software could automatically adjust how much money you spend on ads based on which ones are actually working?
Wow. It's like the data is actually doing the work for you.
Exactly. And that gets to something else that Pathak talks about, which is that it's not just about having the data, it's about using it to actually improve your business and make smarter decisions.
It's like we've gone from this scary idea of being data-driven to something that actually feels kind of doable.
I think so too.
Yeah, it really feels like we've gone from this big, scary idea of data-driven businesses to something we can actually wrap our heads around.
Right. It's about changing how we think about data, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's not this thing we should be afraid of. It's more like, it's like a partner.
Okay, I like that.
It can actually help us do things better if we let it.
So before we wrap up, what's like the one big thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I think Pithok really wants us to rethink how we see data entirely. Instead of, those wiggling charts that just confuse us, what if we thought of data as this teammate that helps us make smarter decisions
Yeah.
and helps us come up with new ideas and achieve things we never thought we could?
It's about being curious and experimenting, just like Pathak talks about.
Yeah. And remembering that the world of data is always changing. If we're open to new things and we're willing to try things out, then who knows what we can do?
That's a great point to end on. So if you're out there and you're ready to start your own data-driven journey, remember what we talked about.
Yeah.
Figure out what you want to achieve,
Yeah.
figure out what you can control, and don't be afraid to experiment a little.
And hey, if you see those wiggling charts, don't panic.
Right.
Just take a breath, remember the tools, and trust that there's a message in there somewhere.
Perfect. Until next time, keep diving.